Cool.
Yeah. So going live doesn't mean anything. We can still figure it out.
You're not live streaming.
That's right.
Yeah. I am live streaming, but that's okay. No one's watching.
Does anybody watch the live stream?
A handful do. It just depends on the time of day.
It depends. One time we were doing it a few episodes ago, and we were getting nice chat from a few people, and we were actually responding to it, which was kind of nice.
Yeah.
So
does the live streaming bother you? Do you want me to not live stream? Because it records and streams at the same time.
It's fine.
Okay.
Are we going to do intros of some sort?
I guess we should.
I think we should.
Yeah.
So this is two casts. So why don't we have the podcasts introduce themselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Starting with our esteemed colleagues who on the right side of the world, who drive on the right side of the road.
Yeah. The correct side, you mean?
The correct. Yeah. Yes.
That's a valid point.
Just glad you're acknowledging that.
Yeah. So I'm Shane Gibson. I'm one half of the No-Nonsense Agile Podcast with Murray. I'm based in a very small country at the bottom of the world called New Zealand. I've been an Agile coach for the last 10 years, still starting my journey, so still a baby. And I focus on helping data and analytics teams that are struggling with adopting these Agile patterns and practices. That's me.
Yeah, so I'm Murray Robbins, and I am also a host of the No-Nonsense Agile Podcast with Shane. I think we've done about 64 episodes now. We do one a week, and we interview thought leaders in our space. I am an Agile coach, a delivery leader. I've done all sorts of different things in this space. Do a lot of consulting these days. That's me.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, Bob, take it away.
I'm Bob Galen. I'm part of the Metacast. I'm an independent Agile coach. Been doing it for a little while and enjoy it. Getting a little bit curmudgeonly every year over year, which makes me happy. Just a little bit, just a tad curmudgeonly. And Murray and Shane, I'm excited to be doing this. So thank you. We've talked about it, and coordinating schedules was a challenge. So I'm super excited. For me, I may not show it because I'm old and it may harm me, do physical harm, but I'm super excited to be here with you guys. And then my better half in the Metacast, much better half.
Oh yeah, agreed. I don't know how you harm yourself with excitement, but okay. We'll just
an old heart. It's an old
heart. Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Yes. So as mentioned, I am definitely the better half of the Metacast for almost 13 years now. We're 200 plus episodes of two good friends getting together and enjoying time, and we record it, put it on the internet, and people listen to it, which is kind of cool. I too am an Agile coach. I've been pivoting a little bit more to a growth coach is what I'm calling myself, because I do really enjoy helping companies reach new levels. So that's where I get my oxygen and my excitement, which may be dangerous to me. I just found out. But we are here. I believe there's intent that we're going to duke it out. Podcast versus podcast. I don't know how we're going to do that across the globe, but we're going to figure it out.
Yeah, I thought we were going to do a live. Well, I suggested we do a live or lean coffee type of format.
Oh, yeah, sounds good. Yeah,
where we put up topics, we vote on them, and then we go for 15 minutes, and then see if we want to continue or go on the next one. You guys have done that before, haven't you?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
we've teed up some favorite topics as well.
Yeah.
So maybe not pure voting, but maybe like a passionate topic. I know Shane had one. I think I threw one in there.
Yeah, I threw one.
As long as we're not go ahead.
I suggest that we talk about whether Elon Musk is agile or not.
Oh, I thought that was a good one, or even a good leader or not, right? Or a good leader. Yeah, that would be a good one. Do you want to start with that one?
Well, if you guys are happy to, yeah. Yeah. Shall I say what I think, and then we can you can tell me I'm wrong or not?
I'd love go for it, Murray.
Yeah.
I think that there are things about the way Elon Musk behaves which are exceptionally agile, particularly around his process. So he's very experimental, very iterative, very focused on learning. Everything he does in his company seems to be, rapid iterations. He'll go off in one direction, I'll learn something and change it. So very, very focused on outcome over output, I would say. Very focused on product over project. Very anti-bureaucratic in the things he says. So that part of it seems really agile to me. On the other hand, he seems like a toxic narcissist in the way he behaves with people. I mean, you can see the way he just fired 50% of people at Twitter without giving any time really to think about it. Like, firing the people who write the least code is not the way to find the best coders. There's a lot of crappy coders who write far too much, 10 times as much code than they need to. And then giving people like a week to work it out, and then saying, you've got to go super hardcore or you're out. If you can't work 14 hours or 18 hours a day, 7 days a week like I do, that's terrible. And then there's a great article by his first wife, I Was a Trophy Starter Wife, which talks about, she said he pursued her like he was the Terminator. And then once he got her, he lost interest in her and doesn't care about his children at all. So, there's all sorts of things people say about how he's extremely intolerant of criticism. He's been firing people all the time. Anyone who disagrees with him basically gets fired. That's not creating psychological safety. That's not empowering teams. That's not building great teams. Like, for me, agile is all the output focus and everything. But how do you get there? You get out there by harnessing people's talents, by building great teams, by building people up, not by threatening to shoot them. That's my take on it. Some good things, some bad things. My summary is he'd make an excellent supervillain in a movie.
Agreed. I have some thoughts on that. I've not seen an instance where, from an operational perspective, he's not been in an agile lean, at least. It's always like, when I first started paying attention to the SpaceX launches and the fact that they were launching these $1 million rockets with an expectation that it probably wouldn't work, but it was okay because they would get the data and learn and be able to make it work the next time. It's like, holy cow, the fact that you're doing that with space travel, that's pretty cool. While I agree his entrance into Twitter has been very messy, one of the reasonable things is they at least know what's being asked of them. There are too many places where there's lack of clarity on what good is. So you're left to wander the earth and figure things out, and hopefully you get it right. Is it brash and abrasive? Yes, but there's at least clarity. I'm not suggesting anybody operate like that, but there's an outcome of clarity, which doesn't happen in many places. And then I find it hard to live in a world where Tesla is successful, SpaceX seems to be successful, and however many other companies are there that I don't know are successful, and having one human being be the single guiding hand. So I do wonder if after he's come in and done his mess, if there's a group of people that come in and clean things up and then get it going in the proper direction. I would imagine the world that he lives in is quite disconnected from reality. So I imagine that's what drives some of the behaviors that he has, but his company seems successful. So they're So there has to be some sanity that follows up and cleans up the mess. Otherwise, I don't think we'd be launching people into space like SpaceX is. So that's my view from where I sit here on the proper side of the earth.
So hanging upside down, it takes me a little while for the blood to get back to my feet. I'd wonder what the North Star for Tesla is. So I read an article the other day that actually the majority of their profits made by selling carbon credits to the other car companies so they don't have to produce electric cars. So that, effectively the fact that they're still building those big behemoth F-150 trucks that look like small buses over on your side of the world, which is a good idea because you've got more lanes on your road, right? So you can actually drive them. But it's allowing those companies to actually keep building those gas burners. And therefore, if the North Star metric really is saving the planet, they're not achieving it. So under the covers, what is the core of that business? For me, I struggle with understanding what's actually happening versus what, Twitter sphere and LinkedIn is saying. One of the things I learned very early in my career is when I work with a new team to sit and observe and see what's actually going on, because often you see a veneer of what you think's going on, but you go under the covers, you learn something. And the second thing is this idea about this person versus that person. So, not looking at the person, but looking at the behavior. The perception is it's not behaviors that I would endorse for teams. It's destructive. It's not healthy. It doesn't create psychological safety. But under the covers, there's some core practices there that actually is this person, right? That idea of experimentation, that idea of, trying something and seeing if it fails, and if it does, just adapt it. That idea of accountability in the right way, not is overstretched it a bit, I think, but maybe one day we will get the edit button on my tweet, because hell, that's a feature as a customer and most of the world's been asking for a long time, and never really understood why it never turned up. So maybe he is listening to the customers now and doing that. If I had to give a scorecard, though, I think most of the behaviors that we see publicly are that person, not this person, right? The ones that we would point to a team and saying, you're being that person, could you please stop? The teams agreed that we want to be this person and behave this way. So not a fan, regardless. I think the damage done way outweighs the benefit to society that he delivers.
I mean, I'm aligning with what the whole agile thing, does he have agile practices? I would say yes. I mean, a lot of, and what's happening is that's drawing a lot of positive commentary from the agile community. I see role modeling. I see posts that talk about the role model he has, as a good role model, a replicatable role model based on these lean practices. Joe Justice is a guy who worked for Tesla, I think, and some people, are making a making a living out of the connection to Tesla. I'm currently thinking, I always write things. I'm writing a blog post about it. My net is he, I think he's brilliant. He's clearly successful from a variety of places. He's successfully running businesses, but I think he's an ass. And I think he exhibits really terrible leadership practices. And there's evidence of that, just the way he fires people on Twitter and things like that. And would I want to work for him? No. Does that matter to anyone? I don't think so. But I wouldn't, that's not someone I would gravitate to. I wouldn't use him as a case study. If I teach leadership courses, I would not use him as a case study to say, let's replicate him. The biggest concern I have about Elon is what I alluded to, though. There's this bandwagon syndrome that happens. So I don't know if you all remember, like Jack Welch at GE. At one point in the 80s and 90s, maybe 2000s, he was the role. I mean, Jack was a terrible leader. I mean, he was, at the time, he was put up on a pedestal for large scale enterprise leadership, CEO leadership. He wrote some books. People wrote books about him. He was a case study. Harvard did case studies about GE. and then it crashed and burned, and then it uncovered that he was a terrible leader and he didn't create sustainability. Jobs is put up sometimes on a pedestal, Steve Jobs, right? Great visionary, much like Musk is, but terrible person to work for. Not someone that you would say, this is a good leadership. Would you want your kids to grow up to be leaders? And would you model them after Musk or Jack Welch or Steve Jobs? And I would say probably not. So my biggest concern is outside of Musk is this bandwagon syndrome that's happening. And I see it's actually really cascading, that everyone, we want to be like Elon. It's almost like the Spotify of leadership, right? Spotify comes out and it's a model that's working. But then we sort of snowball it. That's my concern. And it becomes, and I see some agile leadership coaches and thought leaders right now that are doing that. They're putting Musk up on a pedestal, and that concerns me.
Yeah.
I do want to argue one of the things that you said about you wouldn't want to create a carbon copy of him. I think it would be worth it. I think the brilliance that he and Jobs, like the handful of folks that have come across the technology space, I think net there's more value than destruction, whatever it might be. Maybe we'd be able to control it a bit more effectively, but I do think there is a unique skill that comes along. Now, if you go to some of the things that Shane talked about, maybe the net isn't really as good as the marketing wants us to think or believe. But I think there's always room for that brilliance. You just have to have a strong group to support them.
But is he really that brilliant? Because that Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos was considered brilliant for a long time, for a good 9 years before the last year of it all collapsed. I've been watching videos by a guy called the Common Sense Skeptic, and he has a whole takedown of the financial apparatus of Musk's things, basically saying Solar City was bankrupt and going under, so Tesla brought it out, which they shouldn't. That was a massive conflict of interest. And then basically the argument is that everything's a big house of cards, and that it's all highly unstable, highly risky, and it's really his visionary propaganda which is keeping it up. If Tesla is valued at something like 50 times the value of other car companies, given its profit and income, if that collapsed because people lost faith in him and didn't believe that Tesla was going to grow at 50 times more than the other car companies, which seems impossible anyway, then he wouldn't have the assets to be able to fund everything else, and the whole thing would just collapse pretty quickly.
Sounds a bit like a crypto company that seems to have been not so valuable overnight. If I bring it back to an agile lens, though, there's kind of two questions that Elon forces me to ask. And the first one is, is agile theater okay? Yeah, is that veneer of success but not actually being sustainable change in an organization, is that okay because we're still getting something better? And the second question is, is a talented arsehole on the team okay? If they really are forcing us to do a massive step change, does the team keep them? Or do they go and say, no, you're still an arsehole. We want to work in a sustainable way as a team and trust our teammates. And
the thing about Elon Musk is you don't get any choice. Like, if anybody says, should we keep this talented arsehole or not, they get fired. So there's no choice.
No, but it's your brilliant jerk tolerance. Shane talking about that. Now, he happens to be the leader of companies. Okay, that's fine. But if you took Elon and, to Shane's point, put him on a team, or would we hire someone like that? Right? Yeah. Do we have, and I'm not saying yes or no, but it's a question of a team. Are we going to build teams? Josh, are you going to build an organization? What's our brilliant jerk tolerance? Mine is low. Mine is relatively low. And that would be at a CEO level. And again, I can't fire him. He's successful, or at a team level. It's what message are you sending?
Yeah, this is like building teams around people, isn't it? So this, I believe, the way surgical teams often operate or used to operate. A lot of surgeons are supposed to be brilliant jerks, and they have this whole team around them that manages them and gets everything ready for them and cleans up after them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe it's an option, but the thing that concerns me most about Musk is that I don't think he's honest, or that he allows honesty within his organizations. And it feels to me like honesty is absolutely essential for learning and agile.
I think there's a characteristic. I was listing CEOs in my art, so I was thinking, I brought up Jack Welch. I think Musk is in that category, and they have different characteristics. Bill Gates, if you remember, and people change over time. With the Gates Foundation, they reframe themselves. But Larry Ellison isn't a particularly attractive, successful. So we need to sort of maybe tease apart. You can be successful, that's fine, but what are your leadership characteristics? So the agile execution part would be on the success side. That's great. Are they building a sustainable organization? Steve Jobs with Apple. You could argue that Apple right now, I mean, they're generating revenue, but are they innovating? Josh, I mean, again, have they backfilled him with innovative folks?
Right.
He was that sole innovator. Musk is probably in that same boat. Sometimes you have to look in the long term. It's not today. It's what is Tesla going to be doing 10, 20 years from now?
Yeah.
And is he building that sustainable company that can, is it about building the team, or is it about Elon, or about Jobs, or about whoever?
Yeah. Well, and I think the parallel, of course, I'm going to go to sports, but you have Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan that are legendary top 5 players of all time in basketball, but they were known to be complete assholes because they had an expectation of, you will perform at this level, otherwise we're not going to win championships. And if you can't, I'm going to find a way to make you operate at that level, or find a way to get you out. And that won. It didn't mean they were perfect humans, but it achieved the goal that they had. I'm not saying that Musk is going to be the Michael Jordan of company leadership, but I think there's a parallel there in that there are often unique leaders with insanely unique talents that are near impossible to replicate, and people tried to replicate over and over and said, this is the next Michael Jordan, the next blah blah blah, all of that stuff, and they never quite were. And part of that was his ability to operate at the highest level, but also his ability to demand that of his teammates and for them to deliver. Now, I think there's times where you're going to look back and say, yeah, that was amazing, but there's times where in those practices you're cursing under your breath and you're like, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. So I think there's a parallel there, that as much as we don't like it and don't want it to be that way, I do think there are unique cases where that's the reality. And whether the purist wants it to operate like that, it doesn't matter, because it's quote working depending on what your goal is. But I do think there's examples across the board where that style of leadership works. Whether we like it or not, there's evidence that it does work.
I want to say that we can have innovative, agile execution and servant leadership at the same time. Those two things are not incompatible. There's this, one of those 4x4 matrices that they use to evaluate people. There's like task focus, people focus, right? Elon Musk, 10 out of 10 on task or outcomes, 2 out of 10 on people. That's the way I say it, because he just doesn't care. Like, people are tools to achieve his objectives. Mm-hmm. If you're 10 out of 10 on people and 2 out of 10 on execution, then you're probably an account manager or a salesperson who just, something like that. So that everyone has their uses. But what I want is somebody who's 10 out of 10 on both, or 7 out of 7 on both would be really good. And I think maybe we see examples like that in the military. I'm thinking about Team of Teams and turn the ship around.
Yep.
And also examples that you've seen in the Ukraine, officer corps more recently, where you have very innovative people who actually are taking everyone with them and making everyone better. Shouldn't a leader make everyone better, not by terrifying them, but by building them up?
Yes,
Absolutely.
They totally should. And I agree. That's the ideal situation. But like it or not, there are points of evidence that say the way we would prefer it not to operate, it actually does work. I'm not suggesting that you go and do that or you model that, like Bob is warning about trying to model after what he's doing with Twitter and Tesla and things like that. Like, you shouldn't do that, but there is evidence that's saying it's working. I think time will tell with Twitter and Tesla and all that stuff. We don't know. The story is yet to be told, but we do have, like, Steve Jobs, from what I understand and from what I've read, he was someone that was really hard to work for.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's what success. Success is having enough money to buy the public debt of a country, but fire 7,000 people when you walk in the door. It's not success for me. I think I listen to this podcast every now and again, and they talk a lot about do no harm, and so I like that comment that comes out of the podcast people that say that. One of the things I picked up was I was often walking to an organization working with a team. I had no coaching rules of engagement. So I remember, was kind enough to share his with me, and I created my agile coaching charter, which is when I'm working with a new organization, I say, here's how I'm going to behave, and if I don't, call me out on it. And I think that's important through. But luckily enough, Josh, you mentioned sports, as I knew you would. So I'm going to segue into my question, if that's okay, or my thing. And so
let's do it.
My thing's around Scrum and sprints and all that good stuff, because we know that the word Scrum was based around this game of rugby, to which my country is the best in the world. We still are, right? We may not be at the top at the moment, but that's okay. We're just looking at the backlog. We're doing some retros. We're doing a little bit more experimentation, change. And World Cup will be number one yet again. And so this concept of a sprint, right? This concept of a coach, and so I've got two areas that I want to kind of go through. And one is because Bob's been around for a while. Why the hell is a sprint always 2 weeks? And whenever I tell somebody in the data world in the agile world that we use 3 weeks to begin with a data team because it just seems to work, they just go, no, it's got to be 2. And my question is, does the coach have to have been on the field? So should you have played the game before you start coaching the game? So that's the two areas that I'm intrigued today. Which one do you want to pick up first?
I mean, I'll start with I think the most straightforward one is sprint length. I mean, I remember the early Scrum guides talked about 4 weeks or something like that, or a month. So it was never, no one, back in the early days of Scrum, I think it was like 4 weeks or shorter if you can. And it wasn't very prescriptive. But somewhere along the line, 2 weeks became normalized, Shane, not by, I think by usage. It sort of was that sweet spot that a lot of people gravitated towards. And maybe we lost the notion of short enough, but long enough to do whatever we need to do, right? Like 4 weeks, I remember talking to like some hardware operating system development teams, and 2 weeks, they were like, I can't wipe my nose in 2 weeks, right? I need time to cook a design, an operating system level service design, or data teams like you were talking about. And then they feel like they're forced into 2 weeks. So the ability to select, get it as short as possible. Now, I do think a short sprint is good for learning. Like, I've tried to coax people to do 1 week sprints, only to learn Scrum or to learn how to work together. It's better put, to work together as a team. And the reason I go shorter is the learning loop, right? The feedback loop and the learning loop is all about that. And then once you do that, maybe that's a part of a boot camp, then go to what then pick the length that works and resonates for you, whatever it is. But then you're working effectively within that time box. So I think that's an artificial phenomenon, but it has alluded to be, become a standard.
Well, you had Brian Finster on from Continuous Delivery recently, and he made an argument that people should go to 1 week sprints because shorter sprints highlight process blockages and dysfunctions in your team, and they force you to solve them. In fact, he said he went to like 2-day sprints, didn't he? Some teams to really force them because because testing is often far too disconnected, and you want to like build it into your dev process and everything. Yeah, but I think the overhead is quite high when you think about it. You've got your sprint planning at your beginning, your retro at the end. There's quite a high overhead cost of having sprints once a week. So I think that's probably why people fall into 2 weeks, because it seems worthwhile. It seems doable.
Yeah,
but I mean, I've heard people argue about 2 weeks though. The overhead. I mean, you make an important point. Right, the overhead, the trade-off. To me, it's like figure out in your context, in your ecosystem, right, in your domain, what's the trade-off for the overhead, and that might drive you to 3 weeks or longer as well, just because of that. Josh, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So the overhead piece, I don't buy that, because you can optimize that. So if that's a thing that's slowing you down, then be agile about it and find the waste and find the bits that you don't need. I, like Bob, prefer to start teams with 1 week sprints so they learn how to effectively operate the ceremonies, or there's new words, events, or whatever the right term is now. They have to go through those as many times as possible and get them through that. What I found with 2 week sprints is that's just uncomfortable enough that you reach that boundary of, oh, we can't do that in 2 weeks. And as soon as you start to loosen that and say, all right, we'll go to 3, we'll go to 4, then where else do you start to loosen? So that 2 weeks has been a really good length for the teams and I to be able to really be forced to find that waste and to optimize things to get it to the point where we really can do the thing that so many teams that we've all started with have said, oh, there's no way we can build this, test it, and deploy it in 2 week sprints. Is just not going to happen. And what I found is as soon as you let it flip from 2 to 3 weeks, the floodgate starts to open. And then at that point, what else are you okay letting slide because it's too hard? So that's the success that I found, and why the 2 weeks makes sense to me and the way that I lead teams.
Yeah, I worked with a team recently that was doing 3 week sprints when I got there, and it was really just because they didn't want to tackle their dysfunctions with the handovers between different groups. They decided it was too hard, particularly with an offshore dev team. And in fact, the offshore dev team asked to go back to a traditional way of working because that they felt more comfortable with that. So,
could we tease it apart and say there's the learning team, and then there's the executing team, and what's the right sprint? So if you're learning, to me it would be shorter. Like I'd love 1 week or even 2 days, 3 days. Put pressure on the team, like continuous learning. So you're learning, you're new, you're not just new to Scrum. You're new to operating Scrum in your business domain, with your infrastructure, with your tooling, with your business dynamics, or whatever it is, your hardware dynamics, your platform dynamics. So do it there, but you put tremendous pressure. Think of it as a boot camp, right? You're trying to get folks to go, to Murray, to your point, to go through those things, the dysfunctions. We're trying to become functional. We're trying to become like with a big vision, we're trying to become the All Blacks of Scrum development, right? At least on the cusp of that, and then once we achieve this, we know what we're doing. Then reevaluate and say what's the right sprint length for us to optimize our execution.
One of the guests we had talked about, they talked to Walmart and they talked about Agile Dojo. And it's one of the patterns that I really want to work with a customer and experiment with, right? Because I like this idea of going into a learning space, but rather than learning from courseware, learning by doing. And so I think, to take your point, Bob, if we have permission to spend some time learning, then something like a dojo or short sprint cycles works. Often, though, when I start working with an organization, they have what I call the heat shield, where they always have the heat shield, because otherwise I won't work for them, right? So they have somebody that's sitting there keeping the team safe, taking rid of the noise from the rest of the organization. But there's a natural window of time before that poor person, is like the shuttle, right? The heat's getting a little bit too much for them. And therefore the team have to start to be seen to be delivering some value to the organization, not just learning. And so for me, it depends which lens you're coming in. If you've got in a period of time to be delivering, then finding the sprint length for a team that helps them be the most successful to begin with, and then constantly focus on bringing it down. Because again, if we start off with 2 or 3, we don't even have to stay with it. If we can get it down to 1 or 2, it's great, right? If we're still delivering value, if we're still iterating the way we work, that's awesome. Because the other one that I really struggle with is this idea of a sprint. So again, the All Blacks play 2 halves of 40 minutes, right? They don't even go and play a game straight away again. They go and train, and they have some downtime, and they get themselves ready. Same with basketball, right? They don't play game after game after game. Yet, from a Scrum point of view, we have this marathon behavior we call sprints, and there's no gap or break for the team. So how do you guys see that? Do you naturally bring in, a down week, a research week, go and have fun week, a hackathon day? What do you do to break up the monotony of that marathon constant delivery that the teams get forced into, or force themselves into when they're successful?
What? We lost Robert. Robert?
I'm back. Am
You're
I back?
Okay. You're back. Yeah. So I have thoughts on that. Bob and I have done a couple episodes and talks on how football overlays with Agile and how they're very close to each other. And the way I've phrased it is that the sprint review is your game, because you've done the coaching, you've done the practicing, you did all the work. Now you're out showing off, hey, this is what we've done. And on game day, that's the reality of what happens. The coach can't really make many adjustments for things to go better. The work has been put in over those 2 weeks or however long the team has been practicing, and now it's showtime. Are they going to deliver or not? So that's how I like to view that, as opposed to the game being the only bit that works, because there's so much more that goes into delivering a product, be it software, whatever it might be, that just the final bit is that's the celebratory piece. I think there's people like myself that have something off in their brain and like that nonstop, fast paced, let's do this thing, what's the next thing? That doesn't work well for many teams and for many people. So I have had to learn to build in things like that. And it's been very helpful for me to have a partner that taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, Josh, we got to take the team to do something. Be it we take an afternoon and go do go-karts or whatever it is. But I've always had an Agile coach that's worked well with me that can see and sense and feel that within the team and react and say, hey, we got to do something. And so we go and we take care of that. And that's how I found success in making that dynamic work.
Yeah. Have you guys run Kanban without sprints?
Meaning just flow-based delivery,
flow.
Kanban?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I did, and seemed to work particularly well for operational support type teams. Mm-hmm. But what I found was that I needed to keep the regular events. So planning, I moved planning to once a week, and we did retros once every 2 weeks. while at the same time doing a continuous flow of work. Because without those, it just becomes like you're in a call center or operations or something. The regular reflection and regular planning was very useful still with Kanban. But what was good though was to be allowed to be able to have things just take the time that they take, and to focus on getting things done properly and getting the things through quickly, and prioritizing things. So this one can get done in a few days because it's the top priority, and we don't have to have this fixed scope, but we manage our scope through our WIP limits and so on. And I found that really nice. I found one of the problems with Scrum is that there's always this problem at the end of the sprint where everyone's rushing around trying to finish things and trying to test things, and then people start making shortcuts and working overtime and weekends, and Scrum creates batches of work, and we know that batches of work are a problem in from a lean point of view. They create bottlenecks. So Scrum's not perfect.
I worked at one company and we were doing Scrum pretty well for a few years. And then the reason we moved the development, we were using Kanban in DevOps or on the operations side of the teams, but the development teams were in Scrum. And what I noticed, and I was an inside leader coach, so I wasn't on the outside commenting. I was in the game with the team. But I noticed what I called the tyranny of the time box, that the Scrum time boxes were creating behavior that was just sort of nonsensical. So, for example, some teams rushed, Murray, to your point, at the end of a sprint. Some teams would actually idle up at the end of a sprint, and they were done early, and they didn't want to take anything on. They're like waiting. So, and it was multiple teams, so there was a synchronization issue across the teams. And so it wasn't just one team. It was we were in like a safe environment where we were doing, everyone was synchronized. The sprints were synchronized and cross-team dependencies. And the time boxes the Scrum time boxes were creating stupid decision-making, right? And in the planning and in the execution. And when and it was really causing angst in the teams and execution. And we just decided to, we had grown beyond Scrum and we moved beyond that. And it created a healthier flow. So that's the tyranny of the time box. It created bad decision-making.
Yeah, there's a human condition, which I've had to do a lot of coaching on, where teams aren't comfortable unless they overpack a sprint. So the amount of coaching that I've done to say it's okay to plan for what you absolutely positively know you can get done. And then if we have to pull stuff in at the end of the sprint, great. That's a good thing. But it is a human condition that we have, I guess, from society, whatever it is. Maybe it's a New Zealand thing that like leaked all the way over here. I don't know what happened. But it is this thing, just the number of times I've had to say, it's okay. It's okay for us to have 20 points, even though our average is like 25. It's okay. Like, let's get that done. And then let's make sure what's next is in order. And then we'll just grab it. So it does give it a Kanban type feel, but it also gives you the value of that sprint planning and the time box, because there are choices you have to make. And so forcing people to make those choices and actually make them with confidence, as opposed to like, holy crap, we're going to have to work weekends. Like that's a bad plan and everybody's going to want to leave. But I've been unable to find a place where that condition isn't already in place. And there's this defense of, well, if we don't stack it full with points, then we're not good enough. I'm like, that's completely wrong.
There's a lot of subtle management pressure to do that, I think, from managers saying we're way behind. We've got to get more done. You don't get managers saying you have to put 60 points in a sprint when you've only ever done 20, but people do kind of understand that, so they're trying to do it And then sometimes they do it because they actually want more time to do things. So they say, if we put it in this sprint and it's not going to be finished till next sprint, then I've got lots of time to work on it, which is not what we want.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's direct. I was going to real quickly say that I think there's direct management pressure, Murray. I think there's also like indirect, like folks are so used. I think people are programmed to be pushing themselves. So as a leader in a company, I actually, to Josh's point, I think we have to deprogram or unprogram people. So if the teams are used to being pushed, we need to deliver as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and maximize the flow. As leaders, to Josh's point, we need to de-emphasize that. Like I've tried to talk about quality of delivery rather than the quantity of the delivery, and deprogram folks and really give them permission and create safety for that. So it's what I'm communicating, but the legacy, like, people bring that baggage with them from other companies, and we have to deprogram them and give them the space to do good work. Shane, you were going to say something.
I think often there is a manager versus leader behavior. So, I have worked with organizations where there's been managers trying to fill up the points, right? For all the wrong reasons. Not often, but every now and again you get the narcissist that, doubles the points because they think the team can do better. And I'm with you, Josh. Yeah, teams always overestimate. I think it's human nature. Even though I've got Google Maps now and I can figure out how long it's going to take me to drive to where I need to be, I always underestimate how long it takes me to get out the house, look it up, put my pants on, kind of things, right? So as humans, we are really bad at estimating. And that's one of the things around sprint planning, if we use that ceremony, is this idea that when there's more than one of us in the room having a conversation about the work, our guesstimate's better. And so one of the I always talk about is Scrum and those ceremonies, forcing functions. The idea of daily stand-ups is we're having a forcing function to force the team to have a conversation every day about where they're at, what they've done, and where they're going to go. Over time, when they get really good and mature as a team, they don't need that daily stand-up, right? They just naturally communicate until something changes, right? If we change the team members or we change the environment or something major happens, they get disrupted, and we need to go back to those forcing functions because they have value. So, I'm not a great fan of, there's 5 ceremonies in Scrum and we have to do them all. We should start off with them. And if we then find they have value and truly have no value, then we stop doing them until we recognize, hey, it's not working for us. Maybe bring those ceremonies back and give us value again. So great fan of the idea of those being patterns that have value at certain times in certain contexts, and use them if they do and don't if they don't. But be honest with yourself, right? That, you have actually solved it a different way. You're not just hiding it under the carpet. Yeah.
Hey, Shane, you had another question, like a second question. Maybe we can move on to that. I forget what it was, though.
So as an agile coach, you should have been on the field. So if you're working in a domain software or data or mentoring, should you have actually played the game to be a good coach or not?
Maybe we can roll that in with your question, Bob, which was, do we still need agile coaches?
And if we do, what do they do? What are they? What are they? Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Murray, you and I are like 2 peas in a pod.
Exactly.
So
we've got to disagree more, Bob. I know there's things we can disagree on this topic.
So, I'll start. I think there's a question of Scrum Masters. So to me, a Scrum Master is a form of Agile coach. And I lean away from, do Scrum Masters have to be in the domain? Do they have to have direct skill in the business domain or in the programming domain at the team level? And I would say the same thing probably at a coach level. If you're truly coaching, then you're creating the conversations in the system for teams or organizations to solve their own problems. So you don't necessarily have to be a player in order to be successful with that. It's not a prime requirement. It's a nice secondary requirement to have it. I find that it's really useful for me. But my argument is sometimes that can get in your way. If I'm a novice coach, or if I'm an inexperienced coach, then I start solving problems. So what I do is I take that secondary I have in the game experience and I make it the primary. I start trying to solution for my clients or for the teams. So I'd like to. I think the answer for me is no. Yeah, it's a nice to have, but you have to be wary of it. Now, if you think a coach is problem solving, if your view is they're a consultant or a contractor and they're a problem solver or a solutioner, well, then some of it depends on your definition of what a coach is.
I think this is where we're going to disagree, Bob. I think that it's essential for a coach to have been a player. The thing is, though, that you don't want them to continue to be the player on the team. You want them to support the team. But I think that it does depend on your model of what an agile coach is, as you say. I think that there are two quite different models. There is the counselor facilitator model, which comes from the Agile Coaching Federation and people like that. I totally strongly disagree with that model. And then there's the sports coach model. Like, sports coaches have all been players, and that's absolutely essential to understand the game, what works, what doesn't, what patterns work, what don't, what issues the team are going for. Absolutely critical for credibility. So I think an agile coach is like a sports coach, and I would like to think of them as being more like a consultant as well. Esther Derby has an excellent model of coaching, and we interviewed her on our podcast about this. But she says a coach should be responsible for growing the team and for the outcomes of the team at the same time. Now, it's something you negotiate with your client. You say, do you want me to just be an observer and provide feedback? Because I can do that if you want. But I can also take responsibility for outcomes and, provide my expert advice if you want that. So there's this whole 3x3 matrix: responsibility for outcomes, responsibility for growth. And I see a lot of Scrum Masters and Agile coaches who now think we don't have any responsibility for outcome at all. I've heard people say, this is an easy job. I have no responsibility for outcomes. I just facilitate things. I talk to people and, that's it. It's great. Very well paid for not having to take any responsibility for anything.
There's a couple things there. From my perspective, to be successful, I think you have to carry with you one of two things. One is experience being a player that allows you to have that easy dialogue with the team and fit right in. The other is having a unique skill of team leadership and empowerment, things like that. If you can come in and offer just that, because that's really a significant portion of what the role is about, that's a relatively unique thing to have somebody come from the outside and just be able to do really well with that. I do think it can exist. Relatively rare, but I do think it can. The other is going back to the larger question of, do we still need agile coaches? Every Scrum Master agile coach I've ever hired, I've chartered them with putting themselves out of a job. Reality is, the only way that would ever happen is if nothing changes within the organization. And we know that's not going to happen, because they're going to have to adjust as the company grows or shrinks or acquires. Who knows what happens? But ultimately, it's your job as an agile coach to infuse that agile mindset into everybody that's a part of your teams, to the point where you aren't needed. But there will be new people that are hired. There will be new teams that are stood up. There will be new products. There will be new projects. All of those things, I think, create a never-ending need for an agile leader of some sort to be there to support the team as the world changes.
Yeah, we tend to be brought in as consultants for a period of time. So you do need to prepare to to leave. I agree with that. I also think a critical part of our role is growing other people so that they can be good scrum masters and, become coaches. That also elevates you as a coach. It means you have more time to work with, senior managers, which is often where the real major blockers are.
I think that's a good point.
Go ahead,
That's a
Shane.
good point as well, right? If our goal is to adopt an agile way of working, not to implement an agile transformation or an agile project, right? If the goal is to work in a better way using our agile techniques, then actually the agile coaches and the scrum coaches, because I'm not a great fan of the term scrum master anymore. I think we should actually change it. And I think, sorry, go off on a tangent here. I got really confused with agile coaching, right? My view was we all called ourselves agile coaches after people could be a scrum master doing a 2-day course and charged too little as consultants. So we elevated our term to be agile coaches. I've revised that thought now where I talk about scrum coaches who are people who are experienced in scrum. And agile coaches tend to be people who are experienced in other agile techniques and patterns and bring that to the lens. But as consultants, as external people that are paid by the hour or by the day, our goal should be to get that coaching capability embedded in the organization with permanent people and then get the hell out of Dodge. Now, we might get brought back. So often I'll accelerate the team to a point and then I'll leave. And then when they get to the scaling problem, right, where they go from a pod of 9 and they want to go to 27, they had a scaling problem, then often I'll go back and work with that customer because we got on and we got another problem to solve, right? And so I'm bringing my expertise in. So for me, we have to be really clear what's our role, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve and how long is that going to take? And then how do we know we're successful? But an agile coach is always needed because change is constant, but it should be embedded as a way of working within the organization, not a consultant coming in to transform. That's my view.
I now see that I'm competing with people who have done a 2-day agile coaching course through IC Agile or something like that. They were the HR change lead. Now they've done a 2-day coaching course and now they're getting an agile coaching gig that, I was interested in. And yet they have no experience at agile at all. It's all these people who've never worked in an agile team who are now calling themselves agile coaches. And I think that's going to lead to bad outcomes. They're going to be lovely people, probably. I think this is what's happening. Managers wanting to hire non-threatening people who are compliant and nice and become friends with everybody and who are good communicators, maybe good at helping people improve their feedback skills. They're probably servant leaders. They've probably got a good attitude like that. But I don't think that's enough to be an agile coach. Nowhere near enough. I do a lot of organizational change. I do a lot of helping people organize their teams so that they have product teams with everybody in the same team. I do a lot of work to help people change their processes so that they are all working together rather than in silos. And, I do a lot of work with senior managers as well as coaching individuals on how to be a servant leader, how to communicate, how to do feedback. And just these agile coaches with no real agile experience, I find very troubling.
I mean, it's one of the reasons, Murray, that I wrote the book I wrote, The Extraordinarily Badass Agile Coaching, is I got frustrated with people banning around agile coaching and no one knows what that is and they trivialize it, right? And one of the frameworks that I anchor on, there's something called the Agile Coaching Competency Framework that Lisa Atkins and Michael Spade defined in 2010. To me, that helps provide a definition. So it's not just one thing. It's not just consulting. It's not just, do I have agile experience? It's multifaceted. Can I facilitate? Can I provide? Can I mentor? Can I teach? And I'm not talking about just teach a class. I mean, effectively do it, right? Do I understand what it is? And do I have a variety of tools? Facilitation is a deep, broad topic just in and of itself. You talked about organizational development, like organizational models, organizational development models, change management. So Esther's that matrix that Esther that you reference from Esther, I think I have that in the book, and I reference that as well. What it does is it tells you that agile coaching should be multifaceted. If you want to be expert at it, it's not one thing. It's not schmoozing. It's not right. It's not acquiescing all the times. It's in some cases you need to consult. In other cases, you need to facilitate. In other cases, you need to have lean chops or agile chops and bring them to bear. In some cases, and organizational development or modeling. And if you don't have that, then don't coach in that area. Go get Murray to coach in that area, or have in all seriousness, have the wherewithal, the self-awareness that says I understand these things and I don't understand these things. I need to get help, or I need to admit to my client that this is not a strength area of mine. I remember the joke. Someone did a LinkedIn. The number always varies, but someone did a LinkedIn search for agile coaches. And when I was writing the book, I think in the world, like 150,000 people were agile coaches, or 200,000 people, sort of were claimed to be agile coaches. And that struck me as that's these folks, that take a 2-day certification course and then claim to be that. So it's very diluted. And but I would anchor on a model, a framework. The one I anchored the book on was the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel, and I would highly recommend that as a good model. And what that says is you can be working on your coaching chops for 20 years and you're not done, right? It's that's what I like about it. It's something that you can continue to work on, and it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not one thing.
And Bob and I have coached a handful of people from specific skill set, specific jobs, basically, that have navigated well into a Scrum Master role. Teachers have been pretty consistent that we've seen to be an effective teacher, like Bob talked about, to actually like transfer knowledge or to enable people to learn how to learn. There's a whole lot of that facilitation and growth and everything that goes along with that's a path that people can take. Not every role is going to have all the experiences that are needed to transition well, but we have seen a couple that are out there that have played the game, but they didn't know they were playing the game. So I guess at the end of the day, they've all played it. It's just maybe they didn't call it Scrum Master or Agile Coach.
Yeah, I wouldn't hire a teacher who had done a 2-day Scrum Master course as a Scrum Master for any company I've been working with. If there was a teacher who was working in an insurance company in operations and they wanted to, and then they became an SME on an agile team, and then they became a Scrum Master, yeah, that would be good. I'd be happy with that, but not straight from teacher to Scrum Master on a software development team. Never.
So I'm probably going to disagree with you for a change, Murray.
Okay.
So I think if we use a framework that I use, which is novice, practitioner, expert, and coach, right? If we talk about that as levels that we achieve, I'd be happy to bring in, somebody with a non-software engineering background and a non-agile background if they came in as a novice, right? If it's clear that this person's coming in, they've done the course, they're a novice, and we put the framework, the support around them. And that's actually an interesting question that, Bob just raised in my head. How often do we see coaches for agile coaches? Not often, right? We tend to be kind of on our own. So if we can put the support around it, and our goal is to get to that person to a practitioner level with the right support, then that's a good thing. But yeah, putting them in the wild and letting them go for it on their own is horrible. I used to always say that project managers make the worst Scrum coaches, and business analysts make the best. And I think it's around that facilitation. And then I worked with an organization and we had Scott, and Scott was an ex-project manager, and he was an awesome Scrum coach, right? He was a novice, but he was growing really good. Luckily for me, Scott decided that he didn't like Agile. He preferred his Gantt chart. So we went back to being a project manager. So I can still say I've never worked with a project manager that made a good Scrum coach, but I've worked with a hell of a lot of business analysts that made awesome ones. And for me, it's around that mindset, because people in a project management role have been taught for many, many years to behave a certain way, and that way has been successful for them. and for them to change their mindset, right? For them to be able to say, this is my years of experience and my beliefs, and this is how I behave, and move over here, that is incredibly hard. I mean, if I ever had to go back to doing a waterfall project, I'd probably fail spectacularly, more than I used to fail with it, because I believe, start doing agile things, right? I'd behave in a completely different way. I'd like, yeah, that's a great plan.
Well,
But
I
it's
was
changed,
a
right?
project manager, Shane.
I know.
However, I was also a business analyst.
Yes, I know.
So I think anyone can be a good Scrum. I mean, my bias is testers, Shane. I've seen software testers become phenomenal at several places myself. Phenomenal Scrum Masters. I've seen BAs. So I've seen all of the roles can be great ones, and all of the roles can stink at it. Really, so it depends on that. I want to disagree with Murray really quickly, and I don't want to do much time here, but I have evidence here in our area of North Carolina, Murray, where there's a young lady here who pivoted from teaching to Scrum Master, and then she evolved. She worked really hard to coaching, and she's helping teachers make that role. Fidelity just hired 3 people, and they're not hiring them as high performance Scrum Masters. They're hiring them as entry level Scrum Masters, but these folks are kicking ass. They're doing well. Not on day one, right? They have to learn the domain. My daughter, and this is my bias, just pivoted from a 15-year career in social work and a leader in a social work to Scrum Master, and she's doing pretty darn well. She just switched jobs, and the domain is her weakness, but her strengths are things like conflict management, facilitation, coaching up to leaders, having the courage and the wherewithal to have those crucial conversations, which a lot of folks don't. So I have direct evidence. You and I can maybe talk about it offline. I'm not trying to convince you, of people who know nothing about the technology and are coming into a variety of tech environments, and they're kicking butt.
Well, look,
and I see that it's a new trend. I didn't see that 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but I see that as a modern trend.
Yeah, people like that definitely have strong people and facilitation skills, which is useful. I would just want them to be a player in an agile team for a while before they became the Scrum Master. I would like to see them be a tester or a business analyst for, minimum 6 months before in an agile team that was working before they became the Scrum Master, because I think that Scrum Master isn't a novice job. I think what we always do is we pick somebody who's working in the team who seems quite good with people and communication and understands the domain and how they work, and we teach them how to be a Scrum Master. That's how people become Scrum Masters, and that works quite well. But for a teacher, let's have them be a BA or a QA or something in a team for a while, and then become the Scrum Master, I would say.
I would argue that the approach that you talked about that is working well, I haven't seen it work very well often. I've seen it work a couple times where you pick somebody, but it's that and thing that Bob and I have always run up against, of they are a engineer and a Scrum Master because the company's too cheap and doesn't want to pay for a really experienced person to come in and really make the difference that they can. So they half-ass it. Maybe you've seen different things where they don't half-ass it and they really get that person the training that's needed to become competent within that role. But everywhere I've been where they've moved somebody from within the team to now become a Scrum Master, it's a money saving thing and ends up backfiring. And eventually they go get real Scrum Masters, but it takes 1.5 years of frustration across the board, especially of the Scrum Master that just wants to do a good job, but isn't empowered to really become who they can be. So that's what I've seen with most of the companies that I've coached.
I've seen it work well. I've only had one case where it didn't work, but I've seen it work very well with QAs and BAs, occasionally with a project manager, occasionally with a senior developer. But maybe it's because I'm coaching them through this process.
Probably,
and I'm really experienced.
Yeah.
I have seen people who have got into this role in a dysfunctional organization like a bank, and then they've started coaching people, and it's all been about Jira tickets and process, and it was just awful. I thought, oh my God, how did you've got completely gone down the wrong path.
I think Shane brought up a point earlier. I think regardless of the skills or the background, it's like coaching the coaches. So onboarding, mentoring at the Scrum Master level. So do you come in as an apprentice? Do you have someone who is co-Scrum Mastering with you for 3 months or whatever it is, who's guiding you? Then do you grow? Or I'm not talking about, sort of title levels or org chart levels. I'm talking about, growing people up. I think there's a lot of throwing people into the mix and then just saying, figure this stuff out. That shame on all of us for that. We should be looking at it as a serious job and then growing folks. That's actually what's happening when people pivot in from education. There's, clearly we have to provide support for them, right? Oh, okay. So we'll provide support for them and we'll grow them. We won't give them 5 teams to start with. So that would be a bad thing. We'll give them 1 team and we'll give them a partner and a mentor for a period of time. We'll send them to other classes or whatever it is. We'll support them and we'll grow them. I think that should be mandatory on all the roles. Is sort of the mentorship and the coaching.
It's a good point, because we don't do it to our developers. Yeah, we don't drop a novice developer into a team and go, there you go, run. We give them support, right? We mentor them through to get that experience. So why are these supporting roles like a Scrum coach or an Agile coach? Why do we behave that way for that role when we don't for any other role or any other skill in our organizations?
I agree with you both that there needs to be an apprenticeship path for all of our roles. Scrum Master, coach, engineer, tester, UX designer, everything. Because there's always people. You've got to have new people coming in. They're going to be. There's a capability model that's had a lot of academic research that goes novice, beginner, competent, proficient, expert, and they assume that the expert is also a coach, Shane. And there's this idea of different team models. The one that probably makes most sense is what's called the diamond model, where you have a small number of people who are novices coming through all the time. Most people are competent, and a small number of people who are experts. But we need to grow and bring people up with mentoring and coaching and training. And, I have to say, in my career, I've had very little effective mentoring, coaching, and training. Most of it is just, here you go, do this. Let me know if you've got any questions.
So just to disagree with you slightly, Murray, and the research, even though I'm not academic, I'm talking out my backside right about now. I think there's a difference between an expert and a coach. And I do it from 2 lenses. I think an expert is somebody who's awesome at doing what they do and they love doing it, right? But the ability to coach somebody else to do it the way you do it is another set of skills that we need to learn if we want to get to that level. The second lens I take on it is a lens for the people who are experts that don't want to become a leader, a manager, or a coach. They just love doing the work at the level they do it, and that's their job that they love doing. And somehow we pressure them into this behavior that they have to go to something else. And so for me, differentiating between an expert, who's somebody who's just awesome at what they do and they love doing it, and then somebody who's a coach who wants to teach and mentor other people to do it the way they do it because that's their passion and what they're good at. I think they are 2 different things when I talk to people. Yeah. But like I said, I'm not an academic. So,
This is called the Dreyfus.
Empirical weapons.
This is called the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition.
Yep. I was going to just connect it back to the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel. One of the reasons I like it over the Agile Coaching Competency Framework, it's extended some of the ideas. One powerful idea is for each of the competencies in the wheel. So facilitation would have a competency. It has some guidance. It has Dreyfus levels built into it. So So, and it gives you guidance. It's not dictatorial. It's not tied to pay. It's tied to if you want to grow yourself. Let's say you're inspired to grow your coaching competencies over time, personal improvement, then it would tell you what a novice looks like. And then what would be some of the behaviors or the activities of a craftsperson or a master. And it does that on a competency by competency basis.
Where can we look this up, Bob?
I will put a link.
You have to buy his book.
No,
there's an awesome book that will have it for you.
And I missed an opportunity there, didn't I? Didn't I, Josh? So I will put a link in chat. Just give me a second.
There's a website called Agile Coaching Growth Wheel. Is that it?
That's right. Let me take a look and make sure.
Is it copyrighted? Somebody taken like the open source idea and then created a website.
No, it's Agile Coaching Growth Wheel. It's open source. It's Creative Commons. The Scrum Alliance, there's working groups that are fleshing it out, particularly the Dreyfus stuff that I was talking about. So there's, and again, it's just trying to identify, hey, what would it look like? What would this level look like? And what would getting to the next level look like? And yeah.
Sorry, Bob, I was being slightly facetious. I was just wondering if there was a big A3 diagram that had the growth wheel on it with a little copyright sticker right next to it so that we couldn't talk about it anymore.
No, it's open source.
So I'm safe to use it. Good, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
We haven't talked about safe.
No, please.
No, because there's a great podcast from two gentlemen over in North Carolina somewhere, which basically said, should I? No. If I'm working in one where they are, if you want to be agile, leave. And I think the definition, the last comment was pure evil.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just evil. So, yeah.
Josh, I've gotten a fair amount of critical feedback about that episode.
Yeah,
from a wide variety of people. Yes. I mean, on my phone, I've gotten text messages. I've gotten emails. I'm lucky someone's not outside my door with a sign or something. Yes.
Excellent. Right. Looking at the time, Josh, did you have one, or should I bring one of my eating utensils out of my drawer?
I mean, you could bring that eating utensil out. I have an idea. I know which one it is.
So
I didn't bring one.
Are we going to stick a fork in it?
I don't know. How do you feel?
I'm open to sticking a fork in it. I felt like we had some really good discussions.
Yeah, we can do that.
There's nothing saying, hey, listen, there's nothing saying we can't do another one of these sometime. We don't have to jam it all into this recording.
Yeah.
Are we going to publish it on both podcasts or what?
I don't see why not.
So.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I can send you the video. So it creates a video, a unified audio, and then separate tracks for each person, depending on how you want to edit. So I'll just give you, hopefully up in the top, it gives you links to download. If not, then I'll send them to you.
Unfortunately, the technical side the technical side of our team is not as creative or gifted as the technical side of your team, so we just do audio at the moment.
Okay.
Bob, you're going to make a concluding remark with great insight.
No insights. No, but I was just going to say thank you. I'm incredibly grateful to you guys for taking the time. I want to do this again sometime.
Yeah, good.
And because I had fun. It was nice. I appreciate you coming or us meeting and taking the time. So I just wanted to say thanks.
Look, thanks for having us. And, I talked to you both when I started my Agile Data podcast many, many years ago to get some hints. So I appreciate the time you did. If we get to the stage where we've got as many quality podcasts out as the two of you, then I'd be stoked. And more importantly, once we get ourselves a t-shirt, and a tiki-toki and those kind of things, and a catch line, right? I'm like, we don't shake and bake. What are we going to do? We don't have that closeout, right? There's so many things that I still look up to the two of you from a podcast point of view. So, thank you.
Can we end this with our tagline? So from beautiful downtown and go around and then do a shake and bake, and can we all do it together? Can we?
Yeah, let's do
yeah.
it.
Josh.
Okay.
All right. So from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina,
And even more beautiful downtown Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina.
And from sunny Paikokariki in New Zealand.
And from cloudy Melbourne in Australia.
I'm Bob Galen.
I'm Josh Anderson.
I'm Shane Gibson.
I'm Murray Robinson.
Shake.
Jake.
And
And
bake.
Take care, y'all.
That was beautiful.
Thank you guys for going along with that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's fine.
Yeah, to me, I think there's a whole series that we can do. Like it can be like Team Hat versus Team Down Under or whatever you guys want to be called. Because Bob and I are both wearing hats for some reason today, or something like that. And then we can queue it up, and we can even talk about some of the topics that we're going to talk about, and try and get people to really engage and get excited about that. I think there's some cool stuff we can do with that.
The only thing
I'm happy.
all joking aside, I don't want to talk about safe. So the three of you can talk about safe sometimes. One topic I would like to talk about is Agile 2. I think
Oh, yeah.
I think there might be some interest on that. So that would be a future topic.
The hell's
but
that? Thing?
Yeah,
It's a thing.
It's a thing that I'm a co-author of, Josh.
He's a co-author of it.
fancy
I was
schmancy.
teeing him up for that.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, Agile 2 is an initiative that I was involved in to do a kind of retrospective on Agile and come up with some new principles
Right.
and
Cool.
patterns, and it resulted in a book.
Some
Yeah.
posters. Nice.
Yeah, some posters. Yeah, I think there's some good stuff in there we can talk about. I particularly like the principles that we came
Yep.
up with.
Do you have a T-shirt though? That's the real important question. No.
I can tell you where to
sorry.
make one. Just go to Google and type in "make my own T-shirt."
Yeah.
Plenty of options. Bob.
So
Have you got a shake and bake T-shirt?
It actually says "shake and bake" on the back.
that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, see, you just, I keep segueing, right? I want to iterate that to shake and bacon. I was like,
So, hey, I got to
All
run
right.
and catch my granddaughter, guys. It was
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah. All right.
All right. Thank
It
you.
was really good. Good to hang out. All
Awesome.
right, I'm going to see you later.